This is a follow-up to my defragging an SSD video. Some people had some problems understanding it, and so I've gone to the trouble of drawing it out a little more visually. Before I begin, I do want to explain that trim does not have anything to do with this. The trim is completely irrelevant. And yes, it is true that on an SSD, access locations, any different location may be accessed basically equally, so defragmentation doesn't inherently speed up the accesses to the SSD, but we'll get into it. So this is modern defrag, as in SSDs really, but modern defragmentation explained. You've got various files in a very, very small, simple file system. So you can see what I've done is color code each one of these files. Now, you can see that this red file is one block, and to keep things simple, we're not going to go over terminology like clusters or whatever. We're going to just stick to blocks. Blocks just like one discrete piece of data, like the smallest amount of data that you can store, be it a cluster, be it a sector. We're just going to do this simple file system to go over it, so I'm just going to call these data blocks, and we're going to leave it at that. Now, the red file is one block and therefore not subject to any kind of fragmentation. The pink file is an unfragmented 2-block file. The orange file is a fragmented 3-block file. And the blue file is an unfragmented, because it can't be, 1-block file. So over here, we have a list of the files. The files say red, 1, pink, and I messed up, this is 3 and 4, block 1, 3 and 4, orange, 7, 11, 15. So this is block 7, block 11, and 15. Now, it is possible, although not likely, it is possible to have these out of order. The orange list could read 15, 11, 7, or 11, 15, 7. The point is, for the sake of simplicity, this is basically the blocks that correspond to each file. So we can see orange is fragmented and has 3. Pink is not fragmented and it has 2 blocks listed. These other two, well, they don't really matter, do they? Now, here's where things get interesting. On an old school file system, you would use something called a FAT to refer to all this. So you have a section of the file system reserved. It looks kind of like these here. And it's just a gigantic grid or array or whatever you want to call it, or a table, a file allocation table, if you will, that literally just says, like say block 3 here, the next block after it is block 4, and then block 4 here, ending block. So that's all that it would do, and then the file entry would point to block 3. That's how FAT works in a nutshell, but we don't use that anymore, because on a modern disk, you would be talking about literal billions of blocks, which means each one of them needs a value. You'd have gigabytes upon gigabytes just for every block to refer to whatever on the disk. So we use what's called an extents-based system now, which is what this depicts. And we'll get to this in just a minute. So the reason that pink says 3-4, but orange says 7, 11, 15, is not just to say that it's blocks 3 and 4. The way that these files would be encoded on disk, you would store each entry in the master file table on NTFS. There are similar structures on Unix file systems. You would store each one of these entries as, you know, file red or whatever has a certain file number or index in the table, but the file red would point to a certain number. We're ignoring that for now, and just for the sake of simplicity, we're assuming that they're the same thing. So the entry for file red will have its extent map attached to it. That's what makes up the file. That's what these are. These are extent maps. So red is 1, and that's it. It's an extent of size 1. Pink, however, is 3, and it's an extent of size 2. So the way that this would be encoded on disk, it would actually say 3, 2. But we are saying 3 to 4 so you can understand it conceptually. Start at 3, and you have a total of 2 blocks. So that's the way it's encoded. That's still 1 extent. So this is 1 extent, this is 1 extent, but what happens when we get to orange, and why is it highlighted in red, even though that's obviously red and not orange? This is the fragmented file. This is why defragmentation makes a difference even if you have the fastest disk on Earth. Even if it's a RAM disk, defragmentation does make a minor difference. Because orange is stored as 3 extents, 7, 11, and 15. So orange's extent map is 3 list items long, not 1. Blue is 1, because it's only 1 block. It doesn't say 7 to 11, it doesn't say 11 to 15. This is 7, 1, 11, 1, 15, 1. So 3 extents of 1 block each. This is how all modern file systems store stuff. What do you do about all that empty space? FAT will store the empty space by just marking each block as empty. But that's not how an extent-based system works. So in an extent-based system, here, we have a free list. The free list is basically the exact same thing as any of these other files. The free list is itself usually treated as a file, but it's a very special file. Unlike these files, orange over here with its 3 extents, or fragments, if you will, orange with its 3 extents may never get touched again. We have no idea. It may get touched rarely. It may be the most frequently touched file on the system. But the free list is always the most frequently touched on the system, unless it's read-only or something. Any modern system is writing so many temporary files or changes or whatever to disk that it makes sense that the free list would be the hottest thing on the entire disk. So it's important to have the free list be relatively quick to work with. This works the same way as these, but I've expanded it out so it's easier for you to understand. So the free list, we've got the sizes of each extent here just for kicks, but the free list is 2 of 1, 2 block size of 1, 5 block size of 2, or not block size, extent size of 2, so it's 5 to 6, 1, 2. Then 8 to 10, so 8, 9, 10, that's 1 extent of 3 blocks, so 8, 3. And then 11, 1, and then 14, 1. So that's what you've got, a free list that's 5 items long, and each one of these extents, if you needed, for example, to open a file, and write 1 block or less of data to it, you need to allocate a block. So you could take this from the free list, or this from the free list, or this from the free list, and boom, you've got 1 block, and that's just the end of that. So that's how the free list works. It would basically just scratch off this one and add this. Let's say we yank extent 14 or block 14 here and make a new file and call it, I don't know, purple, whatever. Purple gets 14, it gets pulled over here, and it gets removed from the free list. So it's no longer an extent listed as available by being as part of the free list. It's now part of a file. And this is a total of 8 free blocks. So we have 8 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1. These are the sizes of the extents that make up the free list. So any file larger than 3, if we need more than 3 blocks worth of data to be stored, any file larger than 3 is guaranteed under these conditions to get fragmented. If we know the incoming data is at least 3 blocks long, we can grab this one, but what if we need to write 6 or 7 blocks worth of data? Well, we can grab 3, okay, that's 3, and now we got to fragment it. We got to get another extent to store 2 more, okay, that's 5, but we need 2 more, 6, 7. So we would end up with 4 fragments minimum under this scenario. 4 fragments, 4 extents for the file. Yeah, it'll reduce the size of the free list, but now that file will have 4 items, which means when it's read, a list of 4 items has to be read and parsed by your CPU. Now, let's say we defragment this, and that's the next drawing you've kind of been seeing a tease of. You're defragmenting this. So you'd leave red alone, and the next one is blue because that's the next free block, and blue is size 1. So we've got an empty of size 1, we've got a file of size 1 that's down here somewhere else, so we'll fill the empty and then mark that as free. So when we do that, when we take blue and move it up here, it actually will cause this section here, if the computer is adding blue back to the free list, it will scan the free list and it will say, hey, wait a minute, so blue's block 13, but blocks 11 and 14 are also empty now. So that becomes a free extent of size 3 instead of what it is now, which is 2 free extents of size 1. So you've reduced the size of the free list by 1 entry, by moving this file here. Actually, technically, if you want to get really technical, you've taken these 3 entries and you've now reduced it to 1, so you've reduced it by 2 entries. I know it's kind of dry, but stick with me. So blue goes here, and that's what you see here. Pink is not fragmented, so we just leave it alone. This is also consolidating free space, by the way. Defragmentation doesn't necessarily do that, but in this case, it's easy enough to do it. Orange is stored here, so what we would do to prevent fragmentation is we'd take the first block of orange and put it here in block 5, so 7 to 5. All right, and then 11, we'd move over to 6, and then 15, we'd move over to 7. Now, orange is already in 7, but it's the head of the file, not the tail of the file, so we still have to do the move. So if we shuffle all that up, we end up with this. This is a file system that has been fully defragmented and free space consolidated. Now look at the lists, okay? You've got red, 1 extent of size 1, pink, 1 extent of size 2. Now those were already that. But orange is 1 extent of size 3. And blue is 1 extent of size 1. So that's it. You've got all of the files are stored as 1 extent instead of being 3 here. And obviously we were pretty good on this because it was only 1 fragmented file. But look what's happened to the free list. So now instead of having a 5 item long, a 5 extent long free list, we have a 1 extent long free list. You just got this big free extent. Now, if the computer is searching for somewhere to put a file of blocks of 7 blocks of size, it doesn't have to go and cherry pick like, well, what's the biggest? 3. What's the next biggest? 2. What's the next biggest? 1. And next biggest 1. It doesn't have to go cherry pick 4 items out of the free list. Now the free list is just one big one. So it just grabs 7 out of the 8 blocks, allocates them to that file, and reduces the free list extent here, the 1 extent that's there, to just 1 block in size. It is true here that this defragmentation does not speed up an SSD, but it does speed up the processing of the file system, especially when you take this and you consider that this is an extremely absurdly simple, even simpler than the earliest 8-bit home computers. They could store, 160, 170 kilobytes per disk. This, if we're talking, half kilobyte sectors, this is like 15 of them, so you're talking like 7.5K. Well, old computers stored hundreds of times that. Well, not hundreds, but you get the idea. Hard drives, massive. So when you get into Windows 10, and we're not dealing with this, we're dealing with, literally hundreds of thousands of files on a system volume. This can get ugly really fast. If you can end up, especially when you have low disk space conditions, with a massive free list. And that's what I was talking about in the video. If your free list is long, then it takes longer to go through and find what you need when you need to write a file. If a file's fragment or extent list is long, then it takes longer to go and fish up both the entry for it that lists those extents and the actual data fragments to put back together when reading. Now, I hope that makes some sense. This would be even worse if you have a weaker CPU. So old, slow computers, like say you whip out like something with a Celeron N2830 or something, it's going to hit those a lot harder because it's going to spend more time going through these lists than it would if you were on a big, like, i7. This stuff doesn't matter quite as much because, yeah, it's going to have to race around the drive more to get it, but hey, it's an SSD, right? But you can see how this becomes more beneficial the slower your hardware. If you have a hard drive going around this free list when we're talking about this being tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of entries, not just 5, that could get bad. So anyway, a little bit of a bonus here while we're talking about this. I drew this to kind of illustrate how all this stuff actually goes together. Not name, because MFT entries don't have names. The names point to the MFT entries. But the way that this works is you've got a master file table entry, and you have all the metadata here. That's dates and just a variety of information about the file. The ISO Pale Lady in the back can be ignored, please. And then you have the extent list. So every file, including the free list, this is all that it is. It's just a bunch of metadata about the file, and then a free list. And it can get ugly because you can actually have this extent list. If the file's big and really fragmented, it can allocate separate lists because an MFT entry only has so many of these extents that are built into the actual entry itself. Like, you can only fit so many in the entry. At some point, it allocates what they call indirect lists, where one of these, if there's too much to it, like say you can't fit, I don't remember the exact number, but let's say you can only fit 3 in an MFT entry, and then you can allocate 1 for an indirect block or whatever. So you'd be able to take these 2 here, they would be put off in some other structure somewhere, and they would become an indirect block. So you can actually end up with MFT entries that have to themselves allocate a block somewhere to store extra MFT data, which causes the entry itself to become fragmented. The extent list can actually become fragmented on disk if it's too long for a given file. So the way that this works is, this is just any given file's extent list. We're using the free list from this diagram up here. We're using the free list as an example, but let's pretend it was a file. So you can see the first extent is block 2, the second is block 5. For some reason I wrote it wrong, and it should actually say second is 5 and 2 long. But we're going to ignore that. 3 is 6, 4, 8, 3 long. You get the idea. So this is the extent list. Well, the way that this works is it looks at this extent list and it goes, okay, I need to read the file. So what are the extents? What's the first one? It's 2. So it reads block 2. What's the second one? Oh, it's 5. So it reads block 5. The third extent, 6. The fourth extent, 8, and it's 3 long, 8, 9, 10. And the fifth, 12. So that's how it puts together everything. And clearly, I realized my mistake, and this is actually the correct one. But this corrected extent list does show you how it works. It really is just, this is the actual file logically, and this is the file broken up into fragments on disk, with a mistake thrown in there just for kicks. So you get the general idea. Just in case any of you are interested in seeing the entire diagram, I'll shuffle things around just a bit. Anyway, that's the entire diagram. I hope that this has been informative. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.